delay it, which can be very serious illness and usually requires hospitalization, sometimes requires being put on a ventilator for a period of time until the body can recover. But that, again, that is very rare. Now, there's always been a question that comes up about allergy to eggs. And even though someone may be allergic to eggs, what's been shown is the components in these vaccines is so limited that people who have an allergy to eggs, unless it's called anaphylaxis, where your throat closes and you stop breathing, you know, if it's just a rash, those folks are able to get the flu vaccine safely. So your peak antibody levels are going to develop within 2 weeks. And so if you're planning on going on a trip, make sure that you get your vaccine a couple of weeks in advance so that you're already protected by the time you go, particularly if you're going to be doing something like a cruise or sitting on an airplane. Yes, ma'am?
Well, who determines what level of shot that the person gets? Is it the age group?
It's predominantly the age group is going to determine it. So individuals over the age of 65, you may do fine with the trivalent or the quadrivalent that's for general use, but you can ask about the Fluzone, and most of the pharmacies will have both sets. Okay, so again, I touched on this already about why don't I feel well after the flu shot. And some of that is some of the soreness and redness and swelling that you might get at the injection site. And that's oftentimes more related to some of the other components in the vaccine. I always like to look at it as evidence that your body's registered that it got something and it's beginning to fight it and actually beginning to build an immune response. Yes, ma'am?
What are some of the components of the vaccine?
So in terms of the antigens of the virus itself.
Like what specifically would make Fluzone so much more effective?
It's 4 times the dose. It's more concentrated.
Okay, and then in addition to the concentration, are there other factors that go into it? Other types of...
Are you thinking preservatives?
No, not preservatives, but what exactly generates the immune response? What activates the immune response?
Okay, so the virus, the components of the virus, maybe the outer coat, the wall, it's not the entire virus, and it's enough of it so that the body recognizes it, first of all, as you don't belong here. Secondly, there's enough of it that the body responds to it as if it were the virus itself in the way that it builds the antibodies to it. And yet, because it is not the entire virus, it cannot cause the infection itself. Yeah.
I was told many, many years ago, when the flu first started back in the 60s, that if you take 2 Tylenol after you get the shot, it really should have any side effects.
Well, you know,
And it's worked for me for all these years.
and it's actually something that we do with babies. So that, you know, a lot of moms I may recommend, or particularly if the babies have a little bit more of a fever or more of a reaction to the vaccine, we give them Tylenol instead of Metafen at the time, or make sure that they have some when they go home to go ahead and give. You're giving a low dose so that you may be able to offset some of those things.
What is the youngest age-wise that you can receive a flu vaccine?
6 months.
At 6 months.
The vaccines have not been, for 2 things, they've not been tested under the age of 6 months, but generally speaking, the immune reaction that they will have from the mother, either via the placenta, through pregnancy, or through breast milk, provides antibodies that provide protection in those first few months. Nevertheless, I wouldn't take an unimmunized infant out into a crowded area during flu season.
Okay, so, but you mentioned that there could be a reaction if they're allergic to egg. How would you know?
No, I think not so much for the infants. You're nodding, it sounds like you have some experience.
I recently received my flu shot on September 1st, and that's when I found out that I was allergic to eggs, and I've been eating eggs. I eat eggs in my cakes and everything, and I found out that I had an allergic reaction. I couldn't move my arm, and I'm still getting back. I had really bad body aches, and so that's pretty much why I'm here, is because because I didn't realize that I could see these adverse effects when I eat eggs all the time.
Okay, so one of the
That
questions
sounds
that's come
awful.
up is, with relation to the egg allergy question. And this young woman had an allergic reaction after getting the flu vaccine in early September. Arm was numb, you said?
It literally hurt from right here. I couldn't lift it above my head, and now going
Almost
like
sounds like
this.
you got a tetanus shot.
Is that a tetanus shot would do that?
Tetanus shot can do that, and some of the others that you do for travel,
Yeah.
like typhoid. Typhoid is a big one, it's a rough one. But how do you know that it was egg?
That's how I had to go to St. Rose, to San Martin, and that's when they told me you've had an allergic reaction to egg. I was like broken out and hives.
So you had rash, you had hives, okay.
Yeah, and I was there for 2 days.
Well, that might be the
So-
kind. So you were hospitalized.
For 2 days.
Good heavens. Okay. So one of the things that you might do once this is all passed is, if they haven't done it already, is actually go for some allergy testing on that.
That's next on my plan.
Yeah. Because I would be really interested to see, like you say, if you've been eating eggs all along without a problem.
I think that's what I meant, because you mentioned that Guillain-Barré is a side effect, or that could happen. So how would you know if your 6-month-old would have a, like you'd have to...
Guillain-Barré has not been identified in the younger age. It's generally more something that involves the older adolescent or adult.
So GBS isn't a side effect for babies, but it's a side effect for adults
Right.
with the flu
So
shot.
far as we know.
As far as we know. Okay. Okay.
Okay, so let's, so again, and if somebody actually does get sick after having the flu vaccine, they may have been exposed, because remember, you're going to be contagious for a few days before you actually have symptoms when you contract most viruses, even the common cold. You are contagious for a couple of days before the virus breaks out. Chickenpox is another good one, because chickenpox is fundamentally a respiratory virus, and you'll have a cold-like syndrome before you break out with your vesicles with the chickenpox virus. So hand hygiene is going to be a really important thing. Yes, sir.
I had a question about the measles, because my son and daughter-in-law, they have a 9-year-old grandchild who lives in Brooklyn, and there's a very high amount of measles cases in Brooklyn. And she had the MMC inoculation when she was 6 months old. And is she completely risk-free now, even though she's the only place in the United States where there's measles?
So please tell me again, what was it that she had? I couldn't hear that.
Pardon me?
So the question is about his son and daughter-in-law
the safety
with
of
a
my
9-month.
granddaughter, even after having the measles, mumps, chickenpox vaccination. She had it at 6 months, and she's living in an area where there's a very high amount of measles cases.
Okay, so the question is, it sounds like she had, and I'm surprised to hear MMC. I'm not familiar with
I
MMC.
think it's MMR.
Rubella. Measles, mumps, and rubella is usually the combo. We actually used to give it at 9 months and then have to repeat it after 12 months. And then because we were doing so well with measles cases, the vaccine schedule shifted to 12 months. And if you got it at 12 months, you were good. But in this case, you're talking about basically an epidemic type situation.
Right.
So it was given early. It will need to be given again probably after 12 months or 15
So
months.
she had it, and I was reading, and they gave it to her at 6 months, and they were very careful taking her out because of this environment that is unique to Brooklyn and New York City.
Thank you for that. I don't know, did everybody hear the question and experience? So the issue was about a grandchild at 6 months in Brooklyn, where there's a higher rate of the highest rate in the states for measles, and getting the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine early at 6 months. How protective is that? The reason that we were giving it at 12 months after a 9-month shot was that we know that at 9 months, the immune response that was mounted was not necessarily effective. And so it was given as a booster then after 12 months. And that's what I'm anticipating, that your granddaughter will have another shot after the age of 12 months. Okay? Thank you. So, wash your hands. If you're in good health otherwise, stay away from other people. Don't transmit it. Better than that, for the most part, get yourself immunized early. And if, other than hand hygiene, wearing a mask can help minimize. And I think what the masks do, as much as anything in terms of the way they physically work, is that they create a greater territory. People are not going to crowd around somebody who's wearing a mask. And if you're ill, please stay home. Yes?
Actually, I had a question, kind of going off of what he said when it comes to are you protected. Say somebody like me who's had MMR as a child, I believe 2 or 3 times, does that mean that you're still protected from all of that years later? Or does that mean that most of the population that had them as a kid are actually walking around and are not protected? Does that virus actually diminish over the years?
So, are you still protected from your measles, mumps, rubella vaccine as a child, or having had the infection as a child? Great question. And we are a living laboratory. So that's why, and I'll come back to it, we have added back the recommendation that adults get at least 1 Tdap vaccine. That's the tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis, the whooping cough. We've added back the whooping cough because we've learned over the years that even though people had the native infection as children or as infants, and they may have mounted a strong response, their body's forgotten about that response. And so the booster of the vaccine reawakens the immune system and to produce more antibodies against that. And it's the same sort of thing with measles, mumps, and rubella. So that going off to college, it may be a marker for getting another MMR.
Is that yearly as well?
No.
Oh.
No.
Wait, so does that mean the vaccines I had as a kid don't work anymore?
The vaccines that you had as a kid worked fine. The fact is your body may have forgotten some of them. That's why in general, the tetanus shot has always had a recommendation for every 10 years. So after you got your initial series as a child, let's try and remember that. Every 10 years to get your tetanus and diphtheria. Oh yes, and now we know at some point in adulthood, you should have at least 1 Tdap that includes the whooping cough. So what we will find out, we've done such amazing work in terms of reducing the burden of some of these illnesses. Mm-hmm. They're devastating. I had a cousin who contracted measles encephalitis as an infant when her 5-year-old brother brought home measles from kindergarten. She did live to be into her 60s, but she was impaired her whole life, both physically and mentally, as a result of the encephalitis. So it's not a benign thing. Now, when it came time for mumps, there was not a mumps vaccine when I was a child, but when my brother and sister got mumps, I got sent to go in and have a pajama party with them. So I slept in the same room with them with the hope that I would get the mumps. Well, I never had the actual mumps infection, but later for medical school, I was tested to make sure before I go on to clinicals and exposed to other patients, I was found to have antibodies to measles and mumps and rubella.
And that was because you played with your siblings.
Yeah, and so
you got it naturally.
I got it naturally.
Yeah.
But I subsequently had to get a vaccine. Now, one of the things I will say is that I'm hearing about. We'll get to the shingles vaccine in a minute, which is related to chickenpox. Is that some people are now holding chickenpox parties because they don't want their children to be vaccinated, but they'll take them to a party where there's other kids with vaccine. That is so uncontrolled. You have no idea of how people are going to respond to that. It's going to be a very different dose, if you will, of what they'll be exposed to, maybe a different strain, and that's, and if you've got any of the adults who perhaps their immunity has waned. you have some serious issues.
So you're saying don't go to chickenpox
Don't go to
parties?
chickenpox parties. If you want to do it within your own family, fine, but not your kid's entire class.
I went to one when I was in the 80s. My mom made me do that to get the chickenpox, but
Did
yeah.
it work?
I got the chickenpox. Yeah, I did. It was,
So,
2 years ago, I was diagnosed as having pertussis, which is whooping cough.
right.
So now that I've had it as an adult, am I immune to it? Which my body is like, not going to be good anymore?
You know, the only way that you would know would be to get a titer done. And most people are not doing a blood test to check the measurements of those antibodies. And we'll do that. I'm sorry?
What's a titer?
Titer's a blood level to see what's the level of the antibodies that you have.
titers test.
It's just a blood test.
Oh, that's like a good idea.
I have a question. Sorry, I know we're talking about the flu vaccine, but he said there was an epidemic. How many people actually passed away from the measles this year?
You know, I meant to look at that number before coming in, but I think we're in the level of about 1,200 deaths. So when you're looking at it compared to flu, the influenza deaths from a couple of years ago, not by comparison, but it is totally preventable.
There's been 1,200 deaths this year.
I think over the last couple of years.
No, just worldwide.
Worldwide or in America?
U.S.
In America, wow. 1,200 people, that's crazy.
Okay, so we've already been talking about the, yes sir?
What is the name of the flu shot for leukemia?
Fluzone. Fluzone.
Should I ask for that? Because we walk in, they just give me a shot.
Yes, 1,200
So
deaths.
ask him, which one are you giving
I
me?
don't know what he knows what he's doing because it's a student pharmacist is what you give him. So,
The student may know the most.
Trying to stress is Fluzone, right?
Fluzone. Are you giving me the one for over 65? That's what you asked. So maybe he thought you were younger than that.
What about the other, like the zoster and pneumococcal vaccines? How long do you need to get them?
All right, well, let's move on. So,
Here we go. The
I
adult
got these
schedule.
as a bit of a handout. It's a little bit of a busy slide, and I'll give it to you on paper so you don't need to take a picture of it.
Oh, okay.
And this is a table from the CDC, and if you ever want information about infectious diseases or immunizations, go to cdc.gov and you can get an enormous amount of information. They have sites for physicians as well as for the community, so all levels.
I didn't set that off.
We'll be doing hearing tests next week.
Oof. Oh,
Yeah.
Can you move the mic away from the speaker?
Okay, so you know what you'll see on here is, for those of you over 65, all these are in green are the ones that you need.
that's a lot.
So this is going to be your flu shot, the Tdap or TB, the shingles. We'll talk about that because there are two vaccines now. And then the pneumococcal pneumonia vaccine that I talked about. There's the PCV13 and then the PDSV23. So different recommendations for all of those, and then all of these others are others. So you see here with the measles, mumps, and rubella, we were talking about before, anyone who was born in 1957 or later needs to either get the vaccine.
What? Coming from somebody who probably hasn't had a vaccine in 10 plus years, do they do this all at once? If you haven't had anything for a while, is this recommendation spread out?
No, this is the general recommendation on each of them. It's not about all at once. One of the things that kind of, the question was, do we get all of these all at once? You can. You may not want to just after you got a flu shot. But, you know, if you think about it, the vaccines for children were tested in the combination forms, not in individual vaccines spread out month by month by month by month.
Why?
So that when you're bringing an infant in for their newborn and infant vaccines, they're getting 4 or 5 combos at a time. Now there may be like the
4 or 5 shots or 4 or 5 exposures to different.
yes. So your
So, like, they get it-
your DTaP
Is
is 3, and they'll have the polio
As an adult.
example. No, infants.
Oh.
So the question has to do with, do you get them all at once or do you spread it out? Generally speaking, you're going to spread it out. But for example, the question came up about shingles. Now we've had the Zostavax vaccine now for a number of years, and it was about 50% effective. The real benefit of the shingles vaccine is that it also it reduces how intense your exposure to shingles might be. If you get shingles even after the vaccine, and it reduces by about 50% the likelihood that you'll progress to what's called post-herpetic neuralgia, which is a chronic pain syndrome after shingles, which can last for years and is really, really difficult to manage.
Wait, why would you get the shingles after you get the shingles vaccine?
Because nothing in this life is 100%. So I had the shingles vaccine a number of years ago, and a couple years ago I ended up with, and I was planning on going in and getting the new one because it's recommended this new one is more specific, more powerful, and creates a better immune response.
Right.
But right before I was going to go get it, I ended up breaking out with a mild case of shingles.
Oh, so you didn't get like the bad shingles, you got like the mild shingles from the vaccine.
Yes.
Okay.
No, not from the vaccine.
You got the shingles anyway.
5 or 6 years later, after the vaccine.
So as an adult, I was just ready to just do the flu shot, but now there's
feel like I'm not.
looks like a baby
sold.
vaccine schedule.
But look at your age. Look at the line with your age and see what it is that you need. Yes, ma'am.
Recently we had a new sugar injection, but he was sick with the first one. So he like to give a second one.
Well, that might be the kind of situation to pre-treat. Say take some of the Tylenol in advance, because the new vaccine for shingles is a 2-dose vaccine, and it does create a stronger response. And so if you think of it as creating a stronger response, it also creates more likely, more significant side effects. So again, the shingles vaccine is not causing the shingles.
But you can still get it.
You could still get it. I mean, my son broke out with chickenpox after he had the chickenpox virus vaccine.
Oh, wow.
So a year or so later.
Vaccine. Where would you go to find the information on the side effects? Is that something that you're...
So where can you go to find the side effects? If you go to the cdc.gov website, you'll get a terrific explanation of the side effects. And generally speaking, when you go in for the vaccines, they'll give you a pamphlet with those side effects.
Does that have, going off my question earlier, does that have the ingredients listed as well?
I believe it does. Certainly when you go in, if you go into the pharmacy and ask for their brochures, they'll probably give you the brochures. We have some other questions in the back. It's not so much that it's a booster shot, but the way that the newer vaccine works, the Shingrix, it's a 2-dose system. So in a sense, it's a booster, but you're doing it in a fairly short order. So you'll have one, and then 6 months later, the second one. You just get it when you get it. We used to worry with, for example, the hepatitis B vaccine, that if you didn't mount a response from the vaccine or you missed a dose, that you'd have to go back to the beginning. We now know that that's not so much the case. Yes? Well, the shingles shot, the new one, the Shingrix, it may be hard to read on that table. You can get the Shingrix starting at age 50. So that's the one you might want to check with your insurance to see if it's covered. Because honestly, to me, the advantage of the shingles shot is as much about reducing the post-herpetic neuralgia. My sister-in-law, who was an oncology nurse at the time, and in her early 50s, before the Shingrix was available, came out with shingles. And she suffered for 3 or 4 years with chronic pain as a result of post-herpetic neuralgia. So it's tough. Yes?
If I want to get caught up, because I haven't had vaccines since I was young, and I go in and I get like 4 of them, if I have a bad response to one of them, how do I know which one I should not get again?
So that's a great question. So if you go in and you get multiple vaccines and you have a bad reaction, how do you know which one caused it? It'll be hard to sort out, and there's ways that you can do that. Generally speaking, the bad reactions, other than what your friend experienced with that, being hospitalized for 2 days with the hives, and that's a very serious reaction. Those are very rare.
Okay.
Kind of going off of what she just said, if you were concerned about having a reaction, if you had a reaction as a kid, is there any way to split up, say,
Sure.
DTaP? Like, does that mean that they separate, like,
No,
if I just wanted the pertussis vaccine because I'm afraid of getting whooping cough because I know I did not have that as a kid, like, is that something that they would do and give you just a pertussis shot?
It may be available, but it'll be harder to find. And if you have needed the tetanus update, if you haven't had that for 10 years, then this will be a good time to do the Tdap. So some of the questions about splitting vaccines or getting catch-up, I have an app on my phone that I use because I find it easier than walking over and looking to see where did I leave that jar on the wall, that talks about how to catch up.
Okay.
So I'll be happy to share that with you. Yeah.
It says here about a weakened immune system, and you cannot take some of these things. So that is, I take a biologic, and I was told that I cannot have the shingles vaccine or the pneumonia vaccine or any of these things. So that when they say here, this is the CDC, a weakened system, it means it could be endemic within you or it could be that you take
As a result of something that you're taking. So someone, for example, who might be on chronic steroids would be another one that I would want to have. I would not make a blanket statement, go off and go get these done. But meet with your doctor and have a plan. Other questions?
Okay, you already had the shingles vaccine several years ago. Do we need to get another shingles vaccine?
Well, let me just tell you my story. I got the first shingles vaccine, and about 5 years later, I ended up with a mild case of shingles. And I still remember my natural chickenpox infection when I was 5. My toenails hurt. And so I had the shingles shot, ended up with shingles years later, and I was just about to go in and get the others when we had that shortage. So I need to get back on track, and I will get the Shingrix.
And then what about the pneumonia shot? Is that a one and done, or do you have to give?
Well, there's the 2 of them.
Yes.
1 of each. Depending on some people who have had chronic medical conditions may have already had 1 of them. So there's certain timing that goes into that, and the timing around the 2 of them.
So it's just those 2.
For the pneumonia.
So it's good for life.
Now, the other thing.
No, it's not.
So we think. You know, but you remember, this is about how your body responds.
So then it's not good for life.
Our current recommendations are, yes, but we have that same thing in terms of measles as the example. Yes, you have an estimate.
I have shingles at 23. Should I get my shot?
You should get your shot, and I think that's a great question. I might have to take a look up. Do you wait until you're 50 to get it? Yes, I would do it. Because you can get it again.
How often should I get it for the rest of my life?
It's not so much how often, but I would certainly have you follow at minimum the standard recommendations and go for the Shingrix starting at age 50.
Should I get multiples before that? The next 20 years? I shouldn't get any at all.
Probably not.
Even though I've already had shingles.
Right.
I can tell you with the measles in the 60s,
German measles.
German measles.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little bit different virus.
Okay.
All right.
So if you got something like that naturally as a kid, would you still recommend getting the vaccine if you've already had it naturally as a kid?
Okay, so we share a natural history of having had measles. I wouldn't necessarily go ahead and recommend getting the measles vaccine unless I were going to be traveling in an area, maybe moving to Brooklyn. If I were going to be going on a medical mission, I would either want to get a titer to see, do I still show sign of immunity, or am I going to get another vaccine?
Do most doctors do titers? Because I've never heard of it until today.
We tend to do that as we get ready for clinicals in medical school, because if we are not immunized or we don't have the immunity, if we come in contact with someone who does, we can become the agent to transfer to somebody else. It's kind of like that flu vaccine. We're mandated to get a flu vaccine or wear a mask to protect you. Yes?
I was younger, I had measles, mumps, chickenpox, mononucleosis. So I'm immune from these diseases now.
Assuming your body remembers it. Assuming your body remembers it. And that's the idea. If you think about the tetanus, we know that, we've known for a long time that the tetanus immunity wanes or drops off over time, and that's why it was a recommendation every 10 years to get your tetanus shot. But we're learning about the others. Like I say, pertussis was the next one that we learned about and said, oh, we can't assume that just because you had it as a child that you're still immune. Your body needs a reminder. Here's your reminder.
Is it possible to overdo it? I mean, if you got the pneumococcal vaccine, but don't know what type, and you go in for a new vaccine, is that overdoing it?
You know, we don't think so in terms of the pneumococcal vaccine. The recommendation is if you were at risk, you would go ahead and get it anyway. But particularly if you are, if it's a Medicare covered vaccine, Medicare will be able to tell you whether you have it or not, because they're not going to pay for it once. So they would know what type, because it would have been recorded at that time. So it may be going back through insurance records. One of the things that I think is great that we have in many of our states now is an immunization registry, so that when our children get vaccinated, the information gets recorded into a state registry. So if they go someplace else, that office, if they participate in the registry, can pull up the vaccine record and they'll know exactly what you had and what you're due for.
Isn't that a HIPAA violation? That sounds strange to me. The only reason why I got the flu shot is because I'm going to be volunteering at my kid's school, and they asked that I get it. And I hadn't received a flu shot in maybe like 8 years, and the same thing happened. So now I'm starting to remember why I wasn't getting the flu shot for those years, because I would.
So you had this kind of a reaction to the flu shot 8 years ago?
But I didn't remember because it had been so long.
And you've been eating eggs ever since without a problem?
And I've been eating eggs and I haven't died. So I don't know what's...
I'd love to hear what happens with your allergy testing.
Me too.
That's going to be quite the mystery.
You lose your memory?
I think I lost my memory.
Oh, go ahead.
As a child, when they were getting out, I think it's called smallpox immunization, where they scratch your skin. I read, I think, that the shingles has some kind of connection to that. Is that true?
Well, think of it, it's a pox virus. So it's similar to chicken pox. It's in a larger family, but it's not the same thing.
Chicken pox.
So it doesn't provide you protection against shingles. It doesn't provide protection against chicken pox. You had a question?
Yeah, sorry.
Is
Is there still aluminum as a preservative? I've heard that can be dangerous, like in high doses.
Oh, yes. Is there aluminum in there?
You know what? Let me go on, because I think at the end of my slide I do have something on the preservatives.
Okay.
So you'll probably see, as you pointed out, there's two sides to this handout. One is for the otherwise healthy adult, and the other side for somebody who's got some sort of condition, with a little bit of the difference in the recommendations.
So no aluminum.
So that's what it was. Is Guillain-Barré, 1 to 2 people in a million. I said it's rare, that's pretty rare. So that's not
So one at
zero.
Yeah.
When
Okay.
you consider the number of people who get immunized.
But that you said for adults will get Guillain-Barré, but not babies.
Right. Sir,
I got the pneumococcal last year.
which one?
dose.
Which one?
I don't know. You just give me a shot. It's like, hell. Now, is it mandatory I'm going to get the second one?
Mandatory?
No.
You're in America, it's not mandatory.
Well,
It might be highly recommended. But what you can do is if you
It's
know
not
where
mandatory
you
in
got
Nevada.
it, they'll have the record of which one you got because you would be getting the other one.
So must I get the second one or I can just skip it?
You know, there's musts in this life and there's shoulds. I put that in a should.
Should?
Now, if you were my relative, you're my family member, so you must get it. So I just wanted to give a little bit of information about Southern Hills because you know you're right close to Southern Hills as a hospital, and it occurred to me I was looking at some old slides because we're getting ready to recruit our next group of residents to show you a little bit of our story. We started the evolution from a community hospital to a community teaching hospital back in 2017. We started with our family medicine residents. We had our first class of 8. It was a nice small group. Well, now we not only have all 24 residents in place, family medicine is a 3-year program, but we also have 13 transitional year residents, and they go off to do things like anesthesia and radiology and physical medicine and so forth. And this July, we started with our psychiatry program. So we have 4 psychiatry residents who started with us, and that group will build up to 16. So, you know, we're filling the lobby. I think we're going to have a hard time as the site grows. We'll at least stay the same size. Transitional year changes each year. Psychiatry is growing. And we also started a fellowship, a postgraduate fellowship. So after someone has completed their residency, and in this case, after completing internal medicine residency, we have a gastroenterology, GI fellowship that has started. So we have 3 GI fellows. So we are in part of being part of the solution to the challenges of healthcare here in Southern Nevada, and working very hard on a daily basis to bring you more physicians.
Yay.
And so just a little bit of background for family medicine. We do much of our hospital work right here at Southern Hills. We do some, particularly for pediatric inpatient work that we do in peds emergency medicine over at Sunrise. But our continuity clinic for our residents and where I go on a regular basis is with the Nevada Health Centers, which is the largest federally qualified health center, which is a community clinic network throughout Nevada. They have, in addition to, this is the site where the residents have their ongoing office practice. There are 3 mobile vans. You probably have seen the pink van, that's the oldest around, that's the MAMA van. And people support the MAMA van through that license plate that has the pink ribbon on it. Over here at the bottom we have our Ronald McDonald Care Mobile, which is for children's dental care. And that also, both of those vans go throughout the state. And then we most recently have a van that was funded by the Children's Health Project for reaching out to homeless teens. And so they are, you may see that van here and there throughout the city as we expand our services. So I'm very excited about our growth, and thank you for your time. And I'm going to stay because there's more questions, but I figured nobody was asking about preservatives, so I talked about it at the end.
That aluminum thing.
So the aluminum salts, you know, you can take a look at that. The aluminum is used as an adjuvant to boost the response, and very little of it is used anymore, if at all. But if you've got a concern, you can look up the vaccine contents.
Do they give this, or do they let you know this beforehand? Because I'm seeing something that I'm personally allergic to is neomycin. Is that in all of them, or is that in some of them?
Neomycin.
I think
What's that?
when they say it's residual,
Like
neomycin
cancer
is
causing.
a common antibiotic. So if you see it, you know, when you buy triple antibiotic cream over the counter, it typically has neomycin, and you might want to not get that. But when you're saying residual, that means it may have been part of the preparation process that it's not included, but there may be, it's kind of like you pick up any kind of food that says has been prepared in a factory containing gluten.
Right.
You know, so if you're really sensitive, you might want to be aware of that.
So is that, but that's, my question is that in all of them? Is that
No. You'd have to, it would be specific. Yes, sir.
I read in the New York Times article a couple weeks ago about how powerful these anti-vaccine groups have become in the United States and the disinformation that comes out from that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like the federal government is combating that to the extent that they should. If the CDC comes out with all this information about vaccines, and the president himself said that everyone should be vaccinated. And so I was wondering why the response of the medical community and the government is not strong enough to combat this disinformation.
Well, I think you will see differences in different states. Now, California, granted, it's like 10 times the size of Nevada, is very active, very strong advocacy group. We have several physicians who are part of the legislature in California who have been physically attacked by in some of their testimony. But there's been substantial work it's on a state-by-state basis in terms of rolling back the ability of physicians to easily grant a vaccine exception. Those are getting examined much more
What's
closely.
happening is certain groups of people have very high vaccination rates, like Latinos, and other groups have lesser rates. And when we put that in the United States with all different kinds of people and everything, and you're going to start these populations with low vaccines, and they're going to catch some of these diseases.
Does the CDC.gov actually, that's concerning to me, does the CDC.gov report on what demographics are more highly likely to be anti-vax, or do they?
I don't know that the CDC reports on which community is more likely to be an anti-vaxxer community, but it tends to be your more affluent communities. I mean, as an example, your Latino community, I don't mean to make a gross assumption, but if you look at it in urban areas, you have a higher representation in the Latino community in more impoverished areas. And here, much higher vaccination rates.
Do any of these vaccines shed, like if you're injecting live virus, can you now shed what you're being injected with?
When you're looking at the live viruses, first of all, there's very few.
Yeah.
The circumstances that will be explored is do you or does anyone in your household have an immune deficiency disorder, or do they have active HIV infection? Because that can be more deadly to someone who has an immune deficiency. So that's, again, one of those discussions that occurs. Yes?
I autoimmune disease, and are you saying that my whole family
So no?
around me should not get their live virus?
I think it would depend on what the status is of your autoimmune disease and how well controlled you are. So it's more a matter of what your immune status is. So a lot of the recommendations may be given off almost as blanket categories, but you got to personalize it. And I think that's why we have such a challenge, because medicine really isn't a cookbook. We got to take the person and their story in mind. What I'd like to do is I'd like to wrap up, because I know a lot of you have stayed and have been very patient. Some of you have asked no questions, and yet you move closer. Okay. I will stay and answer questions, but I want you to understand that if you folks have had enough, it's fine if you get up and go. And I really thank you for your patience and your questions. This has been really a lot of fun and entertaining. So, I had your disposal for one.
Okay. I just have a few more questions, but I guess it didn't matter. So I have to piece this together right now.
Well, my
thing is like, if she already got the shingles, and if her kid already got the chicken pox, what is this? This is like not a good upsell, you know? Like I just saying I wasn't sold. I don't know if anybody else was sold on this, but
I can't get the flu shot.
I'm more afraid now than I was before this.
I know.
That's how I feel.
I will not be touching up.
This is a lot. You guys think this is a lot to get? I'm very confused. Still very confused. Hey. Hi. How are you? I have a neighbor here. I'm so are you more confused now than yeah, okay. I know. I'm gonna actually talk to some neighbors right now. We'll figure this out. All right. Bye, guys. I gotta leave some learn the risks on here. Gotta leave some Post-its. Chat soon.